Hey, welcome everybody. It's the Bruce Poppy Show, aka Unpopular Viewpoint. I am Bruce Poppy. I want to welcome all my friends, family, fellow patriots, even you trolls, haters, and stalkers out there. Do you guys hang around for a minute? You just might learn something. So I'm excited today. This episode we're going to be talking to a gentleman who's become a friend. There's lots of correlation, lots of synchronicity in our stories, and as the more and more people I talk to, the more I find there's a lot of alignment with how we got started, what some of the stuff we went through. So I'm excited to bring you this gentleman today. But very quickly, before I bring him on, want to let you know you need to go. I encourage you to go over to brucepoppy.com, and there's that website. It's up now. It's functional. It's all there except for a couple of pages that are going to be coming down the road. But you can find out all about Bruce Poppy, the Unleashing Excellence System. With the 3 pillars. There's a couple of free ebooks you can get on there. And more importantly is the Signal. The Signal is a weekly thing I put out. It's more than just a newsletter. And what I do is I'll share a personal story, and then I break down how I've used the system that I believe God gave me to work through and grow and become a better person, after working through all of my stuff. So it's, burn the mask, unlearn to unleash, and the forge. All that information, brucepoppy.com. Right there, you can get the Signal. Goes out Tuesday. This evening edition will go out. And I'll be talking about, this week's going to be about some of the health sovereignty stuff that I'm finding and I'm battling and dealing with a thyroid issue that went undiagnosed, untreated for so very long. And then now the connection between the thyroid stuff and the cardiac stuff that I've been dealing with. Most people know about that. But the Signal is going to be talking a little bit about that, and there's more videos coming for that as well. So let me bring in our guest here, Mr. Ryan from the Fiercely Vulnerable TV podcast that's on Rumble and also on 1773tv.com. He goes by MAGA_punch on X. He is a resilient patriot warrior, and he's passionate about health, nutrition, saving our country, of course, and he's all about never giving up and keep moving forward. So welcome to the Bruce Poppy Show, aka Unpopular Viewpoint, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Bruce. Good to see you. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. We were talking right before we started the show, about some of the things, but I would just briefly kind of, because everybody has a different story. And I know, and we're in this information warfare. It's a war of stories, a war of narratives. And there's many people out there. I mean, you and I have had the, pleasure, opportunity, and blessing to be able, and the guts and balls to put our face out on the camera, right? Behind, on the webcam and telling people what's going on. But there's a lot of people out there that really think that they are not important. Their story doesn't matter. And I believe the exact opposite. Every single person's story matters. So tell us initially, how is it that you came about before you really started in the podcasting world? Your, kind of brief awakening story. And then maybe later on we can get into, the story and how you're raising your daughter by yourself.
Well, first off, thank you for having me on, Bruce. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here with you. So thank you very much. Um, I was always considered, I guess, maybe a conspiracy theorist, right?
Right.
My,
We
my
all
whole
we all
life,
were, right? Yeah.
right? My whole life. I didn't buy the JFK thing and multiple other of those conspiracies. But really, it started out for me being attacked by probably back at birth. Within the first week, I had a 104-degree temperature in the first week, being attacked by the enemy, and they had to pack me in ice. And then I had a multitude of things, happen to me along the way, whether it be, whether it be losing 5 of my best friends by the time I was 31 years old that you don't find around the street corner. They, they ran the gamut, really. Car accident, heart attack, drug overdose, murder. Yeah, it ran the gamut. And, you know, I used to always say that my wife's friends, one evening in the basement, I was kind of hanging out by myself, and I just told her I spend most of my time living with ghosts because you don't find people like that just around the corner until, of course, the Patriot movement happened. And you lose family, you lose a lot of friends along the way, and you end up replacing them with people that you meet along this journey, which has been really amazing. And they're wonderful people. I can't believe, like yourself, some of the folks that I've met along the way. I've just kind of you sit back in retrospect at times, and you can't believe you have these people's phone numbers and that you can actually call them your friends. But
Right.
um, it, I was always awake, like I said, and my wife was she went to go fly with the Angels in 2019, an auto accident, and that was very shocking to the water. It, I remember it like it was yesterday. I came home, I brought her flowers. It was right before Labor Day weekend. We were brought our bottle of wine home, and kind of we're getting ready for the weekend, right? Gonna have a an awesome time cooking food, celebrating, and then we were gonna get back on track, working out and all that. And I came home on that Thursday. I had been doing a lot of hours working, and I down in the basement watching television. The phone rang about 3:30. That was back when I watched television. I gave television up in 2020. But the phone rang and it was the school. And I thought that they were just going to leave an automated voice message telling me that, there's no school on Monday as they do. I answered it, and it was the administration at the school. My daughter was in the first grade. It was the second week of school. And they said, "Are you coming to come and pick your daughter up?" And I knew something was wrong. And I had known earlier that day I was on a job site east and had heard on the radio when I got my truck around 11 o'clock that there was this massive accident on the highway. And I thought, oh wow, and it's near my home. I didn't think too much of it. I went about my day at the office, went home, like I said, early, and picked her up a bottle of wine. And that bottle of wine, I'd always bring her one home. And I went to Costco, and it's a bottle that they only carried that weekend. So I took it as a sign in retrospect later. Um, and the bottle's name is Soul,
Oh,
Soul.
wow.
This is before I knew anything.
Sure.
And so I'm sitting there, and I knew something was wrong because my wife was always there to pick my daughter up first from school. And I said, I'll be there. So immediately I called my wife's phone. It rang all the way, got the voicemail, and I just knew in my gut something was wrong. So I called back again, and it went directly to voicemail. Little did I know that the coroner had her phone in her hand. And got to the school, picked my daughter up, and you see that look on her face of confusion
Yeah.
in the
Why
first
is
grade.
dad here and not mom, right?
Exactly. And her sister met me there because I called her sister right away and said, I need you to meet me at the school. So she did. And, I formulated a plan that we were going to get home. I was going to probably drive to the site because also called the state police right away, said I couldn't find, my wife, and relayed the name. Never heard back from her, so you can imagine the frustration from not hearing back from the state police. And I formulated a plan that I was going to drop them off. I was going to have her older sister put her in she was 6 at the time, and watch some cartoons. And I was going to go up on the site and check it out because I was getting no communication from anyone. And as lo and behold, when I pulled into my cul-de-sac, there on the street, there were two state troopers that, had no business there. I've never seen
Right.
police.
And this was when you were returning from picking your daughter up from school and you were
That's right.
formulating this plan in your mind, what you were going to do once you got the kids settled.
Right.
Right. So, okay, go ahead.
I drove right up to the officer and had expressed my concern that I had called, and I was looking for my wife, hadn't heard from anybody, and then he had said there were a couple people in the vehicle behind that had some information for me. So you can imagine the adrenaline rush. So I pull in the driveway, get the girls in the house. I'm identified. And once I was identified, that was when honestly, I didn't hear a word, a kind of blackout state. Once they said, I regret to inform you, I couldn't believe it. I was in a fog. Is this really happening? This is a dream, right? Like I'm never gonna, what? And so that shattered me. And I was a broken man. For about 6 months, you and I have talked before. If I didn't tell the full story, I buried my head in a bottle of booze. I was broken and shattered. This was 6 months before COVID happened. And I didn't like the way that I was treated by, the coroner and just the whole process. And it really kind of snapped me into more of a rebellious state than I ever was before, knowing that, we've been lied to on such a level. And then COVID hit, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So COVID hits, and when you needed people, they weren't there because most people were in a panic, and we were not. I was very resilient at that moment of we're pushing back on all this. We're not wearing masks. We're not doing any of this stuff. I had long conversations with my daughter, and I said, all these, if Jesus wants us, he'll come and get us.
right.
And the people that are walking around wearing the masks that are in fear, there's one big thing absent in their life, and it's Jesus. And, I explained to her that Jesus, he was with lepers. He hung out. He showed you not to be afraid, and we're not gonna live this way. But, you can imagine throughout that entire experience of losing my wife, we're in bizarro world now. Not only is my rock missing, my other half, but now the world's just crazy land
Right.
and bizarro world. And when we needed people, they all disappeared. They were running in fear, even friends, everyone. And so I changed my life after that moment. In February, or actually it was I started to get in shape. I started working out. I started to become resilient. I knew nobody was going to come to save me. I really leaned into Jesus and God because it's all we had. And that was February 2nd of 2020 is when I changed my life. I didn't like what I saw, what I was doing, trying to, drink away the pain
Right.
that
And that's, as life goes, we are humans, and these are massive um emotional, mental, spiritual situations. Like I said, losing your rock, from the time that started, like you said, February of 20, to start, turning the tide, if you will, turning the boat around on your own personal life with, climbing out of the bottle. Um,
Mhm.
how long was that? It was 19, September 19 is when your wife, so that
It was
those,
Au- it was August of 2019,
yeah.
the end of August. Yeah.
And then the other question I have is, your rock, how long had you been married before this massive, tragedy, and your life was just upended and turned around?
We had been together just short of 10 years and married. It was 5 weeks before our fourth wedding anniversary, actually, is when this went down. So, I was a mess. I really was. I was a shattered man at the bottom. And, on February 2nd, 2020 was when I changed my life. I got on the keto carnivore diet. I was working out 7 days a week. I got into a lot of challenges for mental toughness. And
Right.
I
So
got into,
was there,
go ahead.
when you had that shift, was there, I mean, any particular, I mean, was it like a spiritual thing? Like you were sitting there one night, and all of a sudden, hey, you just said, hey, I can't sit here in the bottomless bottle, realizing, that your rock is gone and you have a daughter, so what was there any particular trigger or event, or was just some type of, download, a spiritual experience that made you say, hey, I'm done with this. I got to do something different.
I had three instances happen within a week's time. She drove a 2004 Nissan Gold Pathfinder, and I went on a hunting trip. I had help people watch my daughter and dog, and I went on a hunting trip. And we had a flat, so we needed to go to the Walmart on the western slope. And we went inside to get the tire patch before we went out the next day. And lo and behold, when I walk out to the truck to get in the parking lot, directly, I was in the passenger seat, of course. My buddy was driving. The exact same model car, the Nissan, was on the right. And I just stared at it because I realized what I had just seen. And then I went to work. Well, actually, let me back it up. The second thing happened was it's very difficult to get a therapist for a 6-year-old. And I finally got one, and I had taken her there on that Saturday and pulled in the parking lot and just really couldn't believe my life of where I'm at, what I'm doing. I cannot believe this is it. And I pulled in that parking lot, and there was the same model, different car, but the same model vehicle out of 8 cars in the parking lot. And I was like, oh, well, that's a sign she's here with me. So we got through that. Then that weekend passed, and we had a big snowstorm. And I was at home, and we used to enjoy snowstorms together, and I was really missing her. And I went to work on that Monday, and I hadn't taken it took me, you have to understand, it took me 90 days just to remove the sunglasses and walk around in public.
Right.
I
No,
was I was an
I can't even
emotional.
imagine. I mean, we shared before of the, separation and some of my story, being married, since I was 16, this August will be 42 years married. We'd never been apart. And then all of a sudden, ripped apart for just 72 days. I can't even imagine, ripped out for that, what's happened to you. That's devastating to anybody's psyche for sure. So, yeah. So two signs, two vehicles of the same, make and model of what your wife was driving, and the third thing is, and then also too, kind of as a little bit of background, I know you kind of live in a ruralish area of Colorado. So you used to talk about West Side and going to hunting.
Yeah,
So you're a very nature connected, nature centered type of individual.
very, very much so. Barefoot, grounding when I can, all those things. The the third sign was I was driving in the office that day on Monday, and I'm at the stoplight, and it's generally normally a busy intersection, and there were no vehicles at the stoplight. And the next thing happened, that very same make and model, same color, drove past. And I got emotional, and I was kind of a wreck. I had hard time functioning that day. And, when upon my return home, I took a long, hard look in the mirror, what I'd been doing over the last 6 months, just being broken. And I was doing the wrong things, and I knew I needed to be around for my daughter. And the path I was on, I had that long conversation with myself, which is the most important one that you ever have. And it was like, hey, buddy, you're not on the right path. You need to, there's a why here, and you're on the wrong path. And I did not like what I saw in myself, and I knew I needed to make a change. And so that day forward, I made a change for my health and all those other things. I had a buddy that got me into David Goggins, and he's not for everybody, but
No, David Goggins, I love that guy. He gives zero F's about anything. You're either going to do it or you're a whiny little bitch. I mean, that's the bottom line.
I, and it's the truth. I needed
It
that.
is.
I needed that because I was at the bottom, and when you think you can't get any deeper, you're wrong. And so the thing about crawling out of that hole is you have to take every step one by one. As bad as you want to skip steps, you can't. You have to process all of it. And I cried north of a year every day, just heartbroken. Um, but he helped push me through, and like to the part where I did major challenges, just challenging myself mentally. I'd get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning before the sun came up. I was working out. I mean, people thought I was crazy because, in a snowstorm, I'd go out. David Goggin, you got to get your miles in.
Yep.
So I'm out in a snowstorm, and it's sleeting, and I'm on the mountain snowshoeing, and people are close to me are like, "What are you crazy? Like you need to you
Yep.
need to what are you doing? You should stay inside." But that's what gives you the edge of doing something you know that a single percentile of people will actually do and willfully do on their own. And
Right.
so I was pushing myself. I came home, my face was all jacked up from the sleep, and I took a cold shower, and I absolutely hate cold showers. I just wanted that extra oomph, along the way to push me forward mentally, just to develop the toughness that we needed to get through the crazy world that we live in.
Right. Well, no,
And,
I mean, it's most of the things that we experience in the, this has been true in my life as well. It's all mental stuff. It's all,
mhm,
it's a game that we play in our head. This, don't want to get up into crazy science, but the subconscious mind is a real thing. And,
mhm,
that's, training your mind and rewiring your mind to think differently is where a lot of people need to start, and especially in this movement, because we've had to unlearn most of the history, most of the things that we thought we could trust. We have to
mhm,
relearn, and you only do that by taking those first that step. Like you said, you want to skip some steps. Sorry, folks, you can't skip the steps. You got to take one step and then one step and then one step. And I call them the reps, right? That's part of the forge of the Unleashing Excellence system is you got to do the smallest daily action, whatever it is, to move toward the thing you want that you can get a win on. And when you get those small wins, those small steps, it rewires your brain. It's like, oh, I can do that. It builds self-trust, right?
mhm,
And most people wait around for confidence or whatever that they don't take those steps. They're waiting around to be ready or this or that and the other. And it's the mental bullshit game that we play with ourselves. So you were doing exactly the right things, to get you out of the hole. And so from the time that February 2nd, when you decided, hey, you made a decision, you made a decision. That's a key point, the thing to point out as you raised your standard. Your standard had fallen because of the tragedy in your life to drinking and doing whatever things you weren't doing before. And now you said, okay, this is enough. I got to change my standard. I got a daughter. I got to do these things. So you started that process. So from the time you started February 2nd until you felt like you said you were crying for a year. So I'm
oh
guessing
yeah.
through that whole year was the process of you kind of working through some stuff to be able to, get back on track.
Well, all of it. Yes. And when I made that conscious decision to get back up off the mat, it's not how many times you've been knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. And look, there are days I didn't want to get up.
Right.
There were days I was in bed just I had processed a level of depression leading up to that, and I tried to explain it to people, and unless you've been through that level of depression, you don't get it.
Nope.
And as I described it, I said, you're sitting at the table, you need to put the dishes in the sink, and you just can't do it. And I remember an individual looking at me going, "You just pick them up and put them in the sink." And at that moment, I knew he never experienced this. And I'm an upbeat guy, so
Oh yeah.
that was a horrible experience. But
There's
the
so much that aligns with both of our stories, man. Now I'm hearing some more depth to your story. Dude, this stuff just lines up, and everybody goes through the same thing, And like you said,
Mhm.
the decision, that rep would have just been just put the dishes in the sink. For me, when I was going through that during the 72 days situation, for me, just getting out of freaking bed was a win, right?
No, yeah, there were days that I experienced days like that until I made that conscious decision to we're not going to do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. Um, I mean, the world's crazy. This August will be 7 years, and I still can't believe that I'm a widower, raising my daughter, who's now 13, by myself. I mean, I was joking with some friends about, I was a jock, I was a four-sport athlete, and I'm down there washing her clothes, right? And I looked up and was like, "Hi, you find this really funny now? I'm
Yeah.
doing all the work. I'm doing the house cleaning, raising the daughter on my own, and really, it's the things that people had checked on me and asked me how things were going, but it's." it's the things that they don't see that you experience that tear your heart out. Like, when she was 7 years old, in many years leading up to now, where she would be crying. I'd walk bedroom, she'd be crying. She would express to me how she misses mommy, she misses her body, she just wants to give her a hug. And as a father, you're not a mother. You're trying to learn how to work both both roles,
Yep.
but just you want to take that pain away and you can't. It,
Right.
it rips your heart out. So that also gave me an edge and a drive, to keep going for her. I had to be there for her. And on that terrible journey, one of the things we experienced was in 2021, with the mask situation and being treated the way we were, because we just stood up to it all. I she was at this point 9 years old. This 2022 maybe. No, it was 2021. It was November, it was basketball. She was in a rec league, and I stood up at a basketball game because they had the rules, and the rules were if you were drinking or eating, you didn't have to wear a mask. So, of course, I never wore a mask the whole time. I was drinking my coffee, and she didn't wear a mask either. I have pictures to prove it. All the kids on the court, including the coaches, were all wearing masks. And I got her one of those like
I mean,
gaiters.
on the court while they're playing.
Playing basketball, yeah, if you can believe the lunacy of that.
What?
And we had talked on the way, and I had said, "Look, we're not wearing a mask. Do you want to wear one?" And she said, "No." I said, "Well, then you're not. You pull the gator up to right here. You need to breathe fresh air running up down the basketball court."
Oh yeah.
Well, our team was winning right before halftime, and their coach lost his mind, started yelling at my daughter, which you could imagine what that did
Oh,
to me. And they called time, and they came over and approached me. And long story short, I told them, I know the rules here, and so do you. Rule 1 and 2 is if you're eating or drinking, and I just watched you over at the scorer's table. This was the guy that ran the whole program at the rec center, eating a bag of potato chips the entire time. And I took a sip of my coffee, and his head exploded. And, I stood up in front of probably 200 people. I told him that this is child abuse, that you need to stand up for your children. And boy, I gave a platform for at least one person to have my back. And I got to tell you, I was stunned at the cowards raising their children. It was mutiny on me. I had multiple parents calling me out, cursing at me, dropping F-bombs in front of my child, after I consoled her and the whole deal. And he ended up punishing, he's a bully. He ended up punishing all the kids, blowing a whistle and calling the game at halftime because I was drinking my coffee. And that's when it really got wild. I was just glad to get out of there, if you know what I mean.
oh yeah. Yeah. Without, yeah, without putting yourself in some legal jeopardy through
Well,
assault and shit for sure.
and the interesting part is it's all about language, as we find out with these contracts and laws. And the individual had said, "I'm going to have to ask you to put this mask on, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave."
Ask all
Well,
you want, man.
you never asked. You said you're going to have to ask me. So there's your technicality.
Right, right.
Had they have asked me and said, "You need to leave, sir," I would have left. But that didn't happen. So it's very interesting, I think, along the way of, waking up and seeing how language is used to manipulate society. That's an interesting point as
Yeah.
well. But
I mean, there's, yeah, spelling. I mean, it's the language. It's spell casting. I mean, and the English language is probably one of the worst ever. And they all do, for sure, utilize words, and you got to be very, listen. When these Luciferian asshats, as I call them, start bellowing out about different things, you got to listen to the way that they say stuff, the actual words they're using. And once you get to a point, you can see and hear stuff
mhm.
that the average normie watching this stuff that really hasn't had any type of awakening situation, a connection to God or source or universe, whatever you want to call it. Once you see that stuff, you can't unsee it. and it becomes plain as the nose on your face when they start trying to spell cast over you.
Hmm. And in 2023, we were talking about challenges. In 2023, for me, it would have been our eighth wedding anniversary, and I needed a challenge, and I'm deathly afraid of heights. And so I decided to go skydiving and fly with the angels and fly with her.
Wow.
And that was an interesting moment. I I did that with the firefighter that removed my wife from the wreckage,
Uh,
and we've become friends. Our kids, he and I talk a couple times a month. Our kids get together for sleepovers, and I'll tell you that story in a minute
well,
because
yeah, I was going to say, do you remember you telling that before that there was some synchronicity that you didn't know and they brought you together? So I'm curious to hear that again as well.
that was my God story. I'll get back to the skydiving thing. So
Where you
that
did the whole tandem thing where you were strapped to somebody
Yeah,
else. Yeah, yeah.
right, right. But I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, back to the God story was I was at an event in Nashville, Tennessee in April of 2022. And in that event, it is a truther event. I was there and at lunch, and at these events, if anybody's ever been there, you don't get a lot of time at a lunch break. It might be 20 minutes. And so I was sitting at a round table with about eight people, and there were only 200 people in attendance. And sitting there talking, getting to know people, I met this gentleman across from me, and all I knew is that he was from Colorado. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. 200 people in Nashville, Tennessee, and I meet six people from Colorado. What are the chances? And so we go back and we do the whole finished the day. I had met this older gentleman, and we were had plans to go to dinner tonight, like a group of us, right? We're gonna go out. And so I'm down talking to him, and he looks at my bracelet, which has got
Yep.
it's a heart bracelet my daughter made me um, when she was 7. And she said, Daddy, you can see that there's a smaller heart and a larger heart.
Yep.
And she said, Daddy, that's your heart and mine. And so I've been wearing it ever since 2020. I just changed the stretchy band on it. Well, he had asked me about it, and I had told him that my daughter made it, and I kept it light, and I just said, yeah, we lost her mom in 2019 in an auto accident. So this is 2.5 years after the accident, and here comes his wife. And I introduced myself to her, and she introduces herself as Brenda. And I said, that's the most beautiful name I've ever heard. That was my wife's name.
Ah,
And
wow.
he looked at me and grinned. She was kind of thrown off at it. We kept it light. We proceed out to go meet our friends at a restaurant. And then he had said that he was tipped off that a different establishment had the actual speakers. And something came over me and I said, I think we ought to go there. Why don't you text him, give him the opportunity to come meet us, tell him we're going to go there. We'll meet him afterwards. Let's do that. So we proceed into the establishment, and they had four tables and a group all together. So we added a table at the end, and I'm sitting at the head of the table. We have dinner, a couple adult beverages, and the person next to me had gotten up after dinner and left. They were gone. And that gentleman that I met at the round table earlier that day, he was sitting there, so I wanted to get reacquainted, and I sat down with him and we started talking. And he said his name's Ron, and I said, well, what do you do, Ron? Or at first he had asked me about if I had daughters because he noticed the bracelet as well. And we have daughters that are 2 years apart in age, and I said, where do you live, Ron? And he said, I live in Denver. I said, oh, okay. What do you do? And he said, I'm a firefighter, an EMT firefighter in Denver. Well, she wasn't killed in Denver. And at that moment, something came over me, said, ask him, ask him. And so I said, hey, do you remember that accident that happened? And I named the highway, and that there was a big fire and semi had hit her head on. And we paused and he looked at me and he said, I was the firefighter that removed your wife from the wreckage. And the two of us were in tears. I gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek. I told him we're brothers for life because I knew that, this was a God thing meeting him here. Of all places, 2.5 years later. And we've been best friends ever since.
Wow. Talk about synchronicity. I mean, 2.5, 2+ years later, on the other side of the country,
Yep.
you meet the guy who was at the scene where your wife started flying with angels.
And,
That's
and the
you
weight
can't make that crap up, man.
And the weight, Bruce, that I had carried for 2.5 years, not knowing, not being at the accident, wondering what it was like, you can't escape going there
Sure.
mentally. And so the weight that was lifted from me by meeting him was amazing.
Oh yeah.
I can't even put it into words what that felt like. I mean, I was emotional wreck for 5 days. I couldn't stop crying. And it's amazing how God works if you just pay attention to the signs and what he shows you. And I've become very percept,
Sensitive.
if that's the word for it, yeah, like I see the signs on a daily basis.
Sure.
Little synchronicities or whatever you want to call them. I don't believe in coincidences,
No.
but that really started my recovery into high gear of the challenges. And then that next year, what would have been our 8th wedding anniversary, I decided I was going to go skydiving. And again, I told you I was completely I I'm deathly scared. And the day before, I've always been a gamer. And the day before, I was in the fetal position in the bed, just scared to death. I'm actually going to jump out of an airplane. But the day of the event, there's always a calmness that came over me. Like I was ready. I'm doing this.
Right.
And I put my wedding ring on for the first time in 4 years. I actually went to the little bottle of perfume that's still at the house, and I put a little perfume on my wrist, and we're going to do this, right? And as we're going down the runway, it was like, okay, there's no turning back, and I wanted this challenge. I wanted to be put in a position that I knew that I would perform if I had to.
Right.
And so, lo and behold, I sniffed that perfume, looked at my ring, jumped out, and Ron jumped out with me because they had asked, they said, who's going first? And I said, me. And he had skydived a couple times before. But, after we accomplished that, that was on a Tuesday. That Saturday, my daughter and I got baptized by Robert Agee from Banners for Freedom.
Yep.
They were on that Remnant Revolution tour. So we got baptized and life started to get better,
Yep.
you know?
It's funny you mentioned Robert Agee. I became familiar with his banners. That's the billboard guy, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
I got connected with him and was working with him and the team during that take our border back situation that happened. There we had 3 events, one in San Diego, one in Yuma, Arizona, and Robert Agee was the one running the one in Texas. Right near there, that Eagle Point, where at that time, that's where all the crap was going down. It was right near there. So yeah, I'm completely familiar with that guy. Very cool dude.
Yeah. And then a year later I needed another challenge and a group of friends on a Zoom call. I kind of popped in late and they were talking about doing a fast and I've never done a fast before in my life. And I was all in. Like I said, okay, what are we doing? Okay, I'm going to go hardcore. It's just going to be water, Celtic salt under the tongue for 7 straight days. I'd never done anything like this before. And it's very spiritual if you haven't or if you've done it before. It was wonderful, but I needed another challenge like that. It just I kind of have lived my life that way to what David Goggins says, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because my life has been uncomfortable. I've been outside of the box. I have done things that quite frankly I probably would never have done. without the experience that I went through in 2019. And, I don't, I refer to it as the day my life changed forever. And boy, it has. I'm not the same person. There are facets to me that are similar.
Yeah,
Like I've always been a fighter and resilient, but I've changed dramatically through the entire experience. I've gotten leaned into God very close. I have a close relationship. We pray not just morning and night, multiple times throughout the day. I talk to him, and prior to that event, I would have never have done that. All right, I hadn't done that. So it's interesting how God comes into your life and wakes you up.
absolutely. And then the just the challenges, that's what seems to be the recurring thing is you saw something and that you face your fear, you did something you wouldn't normally have done, you took in small steps, step by step by step. So I mean, is that kind of origin story, if you will, built you to what you are, today? How is it that you got into the podcasting thing?
I trying to figure out my place. I was going to a lot of the Clay Clark Reawaken events. I was going to a lot of Patriot events, and I just didn't really know where I was going. I was lost. I mean, shoot, just a couple weeks ago, I felt lost again because the enemy does that to you. And I had some very close friends of mine, and they know who they are. Very dear to me. I love them very much. They had invited me on to tell my story back in May of 2024. And then in June, they invited me to join them as a guest and then a permanent um, contributor to their podcast for 6 months before they really pushed me to do my own thing. And I was really kicking that around, man. I was like, what? You think somebody's going to listen to this?
Yeah.
No way. And I'm so thankful that they pushed me because I never thought I'd be a podcast host. I never thought I would do anything like that. I mean, you talk about stepping outside the box and just challenging yourself again. It was like the challenges never end. And um, thanks to them pushing me because I wasn't seeing it. I probably kicked that can down the road for 6 weeks before I finally took the leap and did it.
Right.
And I honestly, I really enjoy doing it. It's one of my favorite things to do. Probably the thing I get the most enjoyment out of outside of raising my daughter. Um, and really, the show Fiercely Vulnerable is about God gave me the name. So I had probably written down 100 different names, couldn't decide for a couple days, just looking at the list. And I have had a couple angel stories, but the second angel story was how I was pushed forward to do the podcast. I um, I was making green chili of all things, and I needed to go get a bunch of cilantro. So I went to the store to pick up a bunch of cilantro, and all of a sudden this lady sidles up next to me. I don't know her from anybody. Like we're literally touching shoulders, looking at the produce. And she starts in and tells me, um, you don't need to use bread anymore. She starts telling me about the carnivore diet and the keto thing. And I, said to her, "Oh, I know all about it. I watched the Joe Rogan podcast in 2017 with Mark Sisson." My wife and I tried it then. And so in talking, she says, "Well, you got to get the lettuce that's not in the bags because that's got all the poison, right?" And so, for whatever reason, I was compelled to tell her that I'm faced with this. I'm at a crossroads with this whole podcast thing, and just kind of briefly told her that I do one with my buddies. I never told her the name or anything, and she touched my shoulder and she said, "I think you're doing a great job," with this big smile on her face, and I was like, "Wow, that's interesting to say something like that." And then she told me that she had this book for me that she wanted to give me, that she had a bunch of things she was about to donate. And I told her, no, no, no. I was unemployed at the time. And I said, I can buy a 20-page book. I don't, or a $20 book. Yeah, you go ahead and donate that to somebody that really, really needs it. Lo and behold, she leaves her cart. She doesn't even buy anything. So she's there for this encounter, this meeting. I noticed that it was a sign. Um, and I noticed it later, and I'm about to get to that. I pay for the cilantro. She leaves the cart behind empty. She's leaving the store, walks out with me. Her car is the first one parked outside of the door. She pops the hatch and she hands me this book.
Uh-huh.
Do you notice the guy's name on the bottom?
Saladino.
Mark Sisson.
Oh yeah, yeah. Forward, yeah.
That that is the guy, when we got on the keto thing to begin with. So I started connecting the dots, right? We wished each other well and goodbye, and then this feeling came over my body for the next 20 minutes. Like I felt intoxicated. This is like a Thursday afternoon at a grocery store. Like to the point where I didn't think I should even get my vehicle and drive. And
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I knew what I was in the presence of.
Sure.
And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I got emotional. I went and grabbed my next thing that I needed, and I got home and I jumped in the shower, and then something spoke to me, God, and it was, what have you been this whole time through this entire experience since 2019 in this bizarro world, standing up for your child at a basketball game, being persecuted for your beliefs, losing friends, um, the COVID nightmare, my wife's accident. Well, you've been, and I tell my story of, losing her and just try to promote strength. Well, you've been fierce. Well, you've been vulnerable. You have told the story unabashedly with tears in your eyes, and you really don't care if anybody sees you crying. And you've been fierce about it. And I was like, fiercely vulnerable. That's the name of the show. And then my intro and outro came to me, days before my second podcast. And that we took it from there. And the show really is about telling your testimony, your journey through life. It's a conversation like this, very much so, where you get to know the individual for who they are, not just a personality or
Right.
things such. And we get into whatever, it's a genuine, authentic conversation.
Yep.
So I really
And that's
enjoyed.
that's what we need a ton more of. Because as you and I have talked about before, I mean, there's just so much, fake, phony, and false crap out there that Dave from X22 says, of these, personalities, these personas, these things that we see, these podcasters that we see, and their life on the screen and their life off the screen, they don't jive.
They
And
they don't, and then I've unfortunately had the opportunity to meet a few of them.
I
So
know, me too. It's unfortunate, and you know, it is what it is, and they're going to be exposed. I mean, that's just 100. I'm not the guy to do that, though. I could drop some nuclear
yeah,
bombs and pretty much destroy a lot of people from the stuff I know. But hey, that's not my job to do. I just know what I can do,
hmm
and so that's why I appreciate, and you and I, have so much in common, and we're the jive, we're on the right frequency type of thing. And then, and you'd mentioned it earlier on. You talked about losing friends and family. You really didn't lose. You grew to a
right.
point, and you can call it raising your vibration, growing, ascending, whatever term you want to put on it. And those people didn't. And then so you're finding new people, your new tribe that are on that same level or even beyond that you're trying to aspire towards. The David Goggins types and these different people you talked about. So I wholly am supportive, and I'm glad to hear a lot of the inner workings. So in your podcast, Fiercely Vulnerable, people can go check it out. All of Ryan's links to the stuff will be in the description, but you got 1773tv.com. And so tell me quickly, 1773, Yeah, everybody thinks, what 7-3? It's 1776, bro. Don't you know what's going on? So tell me the 1773 story.
Well, goes back to the Tea Party
Yeah,
and where everything started to take a turn leading up to 1776. I do it with the network is with two of my good buddies. They do their own show, Tinfoil Tea Time on Thursdays, and then the three of us are together on a show called Sounds Reasonable on Monday nights. So yeah, we do all that. It's on Rumble and X, and we really enjoy doing it. Brainstorm is where we got our start. That's where we were at, and then we, you know, decided to do our own thing. Really,
yeah,
at the end of the day, and I'm so grateful for everybody at Brainstorm, the family over there, all the folks. They're all great people. But it came to a point where it was just time for us to do our own thing, and we're
right,
all still great. We're all still great friends. There's you see things through life where people just don't do things the right way. They get started with somebody, they don't truly thank them, and then they just selfishly move on because their only concern is their self.
right.
And
And
that's
there's
that's
far
really
too many people that have that attitude and mindset and philosophy. And
yeah,
that's one of the reasons that I believe this is just me, my viewpoint, unpopular as it might be. It's the reason why we are seemingly not turning this thing around here in our country quicker, because there's not enough people with the proper intention and minds to work together rather than fighting each other,
right.
pulling that place. They always say we're not pulling the rope in the same direction, and so
Well, and
that's coming too. I mean, we're before the show we were talking about the MK Ultra stuff. The Anna Paulina Luna is doing these committee meetings, these hearings about the
mhm,
MK Ultra stuff to bring more, and that's just all about. It's not for you and me because we've known this stuff for a while.
right,
It's for the normies sitting out there, and they're like, what is all this? So this is part of the disclosure situation we're going through. But the other thing that she's put out on her X, and I think you even shared it, maybe, or I saw it somewhere, is a big placard. The podcast or influencer files or influencer disclosure, because there's lots of rumors going around that these bigger name podcasters are getting paid off to do certain narratives to try to drive the mindset, the thoughts, the thinking of people out there in a certain direction to drive the narrative. And I know that that's 100% true. But that's another thing. Disclosure. We're in this. That's where we are. I think in this. We're in the disclosure phase.
right,
Q talks about the D class, right? But we're in the disclosure. They're trickling out the UFO or UAP alien stuff. They're just seeding the consciousness, and all these a lot of these hearings. It's all about disclosure and bringing more people, putting that seed in their consciousness so they can begin to think and ask some questions about
right.
why we've gotten where we're going, or how we've gotten here and where we're going to, potentially go.
Well,
What are the things that are, currently that are, happening, that you keep an eye on, that gets the hair on your arm standing up when you start talking about it.
I think one of the things that sticks with me the most is, we know about the election integrity and the voter fraud and what's going on with those machines. And, there are folks still in conversations today that are, well, if they've got it, they need to release it. And I point blank ask them, so you're only interested in that. The Epstein files came out a while ago, a portion of them. Have you looked into those yet? Because if you haven't experienced the dark night of the soul and you haven't looked into the Epstein files, you're really missing the boat because there's so much coming out right now. And that should really get your attention of what they have been doing in that satanic realm and all of those things, especially with the children. And as we've been told, the children will unite the world, which I fully believe.
Yep.
But it amazes me. how many people, when you bring the Epstein files up, they're just natural responses. Oh, yeah, yeah. I've seen, I saw that they came out. Well, have you looked into them?
Yeah. No,
And
I mean,
you can tell who has and who hasn't. One of my good friends, this was a year and a half ago, and his neighbor played in a band for 15 years in Los Angeles, and it was going to be guys' night out. The two of us, his wife was there, and I had brought up the Temple of the Dog song, "Hunger Strike," with Chris Cornell, and I played the lyrics for him, and the gentleman that was in the band, he acted like I was a lunatic, crazy, And I know they were all thinking it, and I said, listen to the lyrics. Trying to tell you this song came out like 25 years ago.
yep.
Oh, you're crazy. You're nuts. His wife was listening. So when the Epstein files came out, he ended up calling me on a Saturday and he said, I got to tell you something. I was in the kitchen and I came out and my wife was on the couch and she was in tears on her phone. And he said, baby, what's wrong? And she said Ryan was right about everything. She was looking into the Epstein files and she was in tears. And I think that if you really look into it, that's exactly the reaction.
Yeah, because there's, I mean, we hear the word Epstein files, but within there and the stuff that they have released, not even the stuff they haven't released, we haven't seen yet, but even the stuff they have, the video clips and all the different, there's a lot there, man, and it's
Mhm.
you say dark night of the soul. I mean, I the word depravity isn't even a bad enough adjective to describe the feeling that you get when you see this stuff, and many people don't recover. They're not ready for it mentally, quite honestly.
Right.
It's
Right. And I
yeah.
think it's going to get a little bit tougher than before it gets better.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see who pulls through and where all that goes.
Yeah.
I don't expect people to come up to me and tell me, you were right. I'm sorry for, calling you all those names and making you look like a lunatic to people.
Right.
I don't expect that at all, but it is if they have if their mind is open and they're curious and they want to learn and expand and grow and find out the truth, that's really all we can do is plant seeds.
Right. We're the Johnny Apple seeds of truth. Plunking these seeds. And the thing, talk about that. There's so many people out there that they're you can tell they're not in the right mindset. They're not in the right vibration level of whatever you want to call it. Because that's what they're looking for. That's what they want to be able to say, hey, I told you so,
Right.
type of thing. Where I was there earlier, but we get to a point, you grow, and now I believe this is again just Poppy's viewpoint, unpopular as it might be, is that the reason many of us were woken up or brought on this journey earlier on is that we're in a boot camp right now. We're in training because I know, like I know my own name, that the big wake up thing, event, whatever I don't know what it's going to be, but there is another massive wave that's going to come. Whether it's a financial situation, whether it's a alien invasion, fake or false or real or what, you know, I don't know what it's going to be, but there is going to be another, and that's our job to grow and become the best people, the best humans that we could possibly be, so that when that happens, we come alongside and in love, help these people understand, and bring them along with what understand what's happened, what's going on, why they're feeling this way. So I believe that's why we're here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Because today is the first day of the rest of your life, and because you've lived it as well, that it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. I don't care about what's going to happen tomorrow. I just got right now, and
Right.
I want to be just a fraction of a percent better as a person, as a human, the next minute or tomorrow than I am today. We got to continually push. And like you said in your story, challenges. You can push yourself, and you push yourself to do stuff, face your fears, do things you never thought you'd be doing. You know, jumping out of a plane, doing a podcast. Hell, I didn't. If you'd have told me 5 to 7 years ago that I'd be an author and write a couple of books or ebooks, I was like, dude, put down Hunter's crack pipe. You know, that's just not going to happen. I'm not that guy. But here the hell we are, right?
Well, and I think that what's interesting to me is along the way of, I think it's how an individual is affected, and it's interesting when you talk to people to find out how they woke up, what triggered it. And for me personally, it was the trauma that I was always awake, but not to the level. I didn't find Q until 2022. I was just you know I had my family. I thought I had the American dream, right? I was busy on the grill, going to work like many folks out there, um, until that trauma hit and my life was turned up. It was rearranged,
Right.
actually,
Yeah.
completely rearranged.
Sure.
And that was my moment of defiance at that point. And then, you know, leaning into God, and then found Q and those types of things. But I think it's very interesting when you go around, you ask people, what was it for you that woke you up, and in hearing their story, and what
Yeah.
made you curious at that point.
Right. Because there's many people out there that haven't heard the stories. And that's why when I started this, with you, that's why one of the reasons I do what I do is to bring forward information, bring forward people's stories, because there's lots of people out there that have a similar story, but yet they haven't found their way, if that makes sense. Right.
Absolutely.
They haven't had, they know some things aren't quite, right. 2 and 2 is not equaling 5, like they want us to believe, but they're not quite there. And hearing somebody like you, what you've gone through, or my story, or any of the other countless hundreds or thousands of other people out there, hearing their stories, like, oh damn, they're just like me. I ain't any different. I'm just a dude that lives in Florida, and now I live in an RV, and now I had balls big enough to put my face in front of a webcam and start ranting about all the shit that pisses me off. Right? That's how this thing got. It was actually Scott McKay, that told me, hey, so, I met him through his circumstances. Don't need to get into now. Most people know the story, but he said, hey, Bruce, you need to get your voice out there, because there's people that you can reach that I can't reach. And here we go, the Scott McKay, the Patriot Street Fighter. Most people, know I'm here and talk for 10 minutes, and you want to run through a fucking wall for the guy, right? So it's the stories that push people and bring people up this ascension ladder, if you will.
Well, and to your point, everybody's out there has adversity, but a lot of people haven't, what I find, haven't processed. They hold back. They want to hide behind a mask, so to speak. And I think that in sharing the stories, which I had been told that what I've been through personally is inspiring, and I need to continue to tell the story. I think the important part is, lots of times you go through life and you don't realize the impact that you've made on someone else, whether it's telling a story or just being kind to them, or maybe it was something that needed to be said that day to snap them out of it. But I think that's the powerful part, and the impactful part is that you just never know who you might impact.
Yeah.
Who you can encourage in what way, and spread strength and hope when they're like, oh man, like you had said, I'm just like him, and he went through this. I can do this. I can do this too. And
Right.
you build a stronger world.
Absolutely. And we're not suggesting that people who have gone through a similar trauma and, torn down and rebuilding a life, that you're going to turn into a podcaster. That's not, but that there is a recovery, there is a process, there is a coming back, because you could have made that decision that you made in February of 20, or February of 20, they
Yep.
said you could not have made that decision. You could have continued down that destructive path that you were, and who knows where things would have gone with you personally, physically, spiritually, and then you're with your daughter as well, right?
And how many people have gone down the wrong path,
Mm-hmm.
It was a conscious decision, and there's nothing easy about it. I
No.
mean, I mean, we're going on 7 years, and I mean, there are certain days out of the year I'm affected. I'm affected on
Oh
our
yeah.
birthday. I'm
It's
affected on Mother's Day. The holidays really affect me. I'm 95% good, but I think that anybody that's experienced something like that, they would be less than honest if they didn't say that there was a void or a hole that quite possibly will always be there.
right. And
But
it,
it's
yep.
how you get through it.
Right.
It's life. And you can you'd be shocked at what you can accomplish and what you can do. And a lot of people, they self-defeat themselves, I find. But if you tell yourself you can't do it, you can't do it.
Right. That's 100% true. And the fact that you've made that decision, and the good grief, you mentioned the masks, man, and the fakeness, and the man, it just everything lines up. And these people are afraid of failing, or they're afraid to take the steps, and there's no reason for that. And
Hmm.
that the saying that time heals all wounds is bullshit. You can learn, you just learn to deal with
You
it
learn to,
better, right?
yeah.
But it's that hole that was ripped out of you in 2019, that's never going to be filled, right?
I would never wish that on my worst enemy.
Right.
That was a pain that I can't describe.
Well, and I can imagine. I can only imagine. I mean, you know, I not my soulmate, but I mean, family members just suddenly, and it's dude. There's so much that's good out there that we need to begin highlighting. You
Hmm.
can always find the negative stuff. It's super easy. You said that this getting out of this hole, or rebuilding, doing what you've done, has not been easy. And 100%, it's nothing worthwhile is ever easy. It may be simple. The steps and the processes that you have to take are your simple steps, but it's never going to be easy, because you're going to experience pain. I tell this, in your life, and and there, I love the saying that until the pain of staying where you're at is greater than the pain of change, then nothing's going to change. You're going to experience pain one way or the other. You're going to
Right.
experience pain by staying the same miserable, woe is me victim type of mentality. You're going to experience pain as you fight through the changes to be able to, come back and rebuild and establish yourself differently. And then the other pain, which is worse, way worse than any of those first two pains, is the pain of regret from years later, that when you finally, have that V8 moment, and like, oh, damn, if I'd have just, that pain of regret, man, that stuff never goes away.
Well, and Bruce, with your situation where your wife was across the country for what, 72 days or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you compartmentalize things. You're a team. They are, what they're good at, what you're good at, but being in the situation that I like a fish out of water. I had to protect my daughter with the mask thing at school, and I had to homeschool her. I had to take her out of school in the starting the third grade.
Awesome.
They duped us in the second grade. They duped us in the second grade. They said no masks. It was a charter school, and 3 p.m. the day before school started, they changed their policy.
Right.
And so we were kind of hosed. So I'm just going to tell you that the school thing for me as a dad, I don't know the best schools to take my child to. I don't. I relied on my partner for that. So talk about being uncomfortable. I mean, that was one of the things where, if I was to tell you that I enjoy being the end all be all when it comes to decision making and not have your teammate to bounce the decision off of,
Right.
that gets rough at times. It really
Sure.
does, because you hope you're doing the right thing. You don't know, but I think it's the best thing I ever could have done for my daughter. I pulled her out. She's homeschooled. I found a Patriot school here a few years ago where she could go and assimilate. It's still a homeschool program. It's still all on us, but at least she's in a room with kids her age, and she gets that social aspect of it 3 days out of the week.
Yep.
And then the other two, she's at home. And, you know, she just finished the seventh grade and is actually going to start freshman year next year. So homeschooling, I couldn't recommend more for folks with.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. We homeschooled our kids. We weren't awake enough, early on, but, did all that. And it was the best thing we ever did. And, a lot of the lies the enemy will tell you, the social aspect, you're not going to get socialized, homeschool kids are just kind of weird, or, all these different things, labels that the system wants to try to influence your decision about your children. Those are all lies. They're just lies from the pit of hell. My kids got all. If there's 4-H, there's all kinds of different program, co-op, different things. More and more people nowadays are realizing the indoctrinational nature of the public school system, and the charter schools. They're a fraction of a percent, maybe slightly better, but still it's the same garbage. And
Right.
people think they can't because the system again has made us believe, oh, way things are, mom and dad have to go to work, and they can't. I can't homeschool. I don't have a degree in teaching. That's a bunch of crap too. I mean, all these different things, these lies that need to be exposed, and we need to be advocates and let people know, hey, you can do it. Just
Right.
test it out and try it out. Worst thing that can happen is you crash and burn and you put your kid back into the indoctrination center. That's the worst thing that can happen. Crazy.
Well, and it's the difficult it's the difficult part of raising my daughter by myself of, I've got to be there for her. So getting traditional employment is a challenge in its own right.
Sure.
And I've got friends that they don't understand that.
Right.
They don't understand that. And I think that's you do kind of have one arm tied behind your back in a way because you're limited on what you can and can't do when you're there focused on your daughter and she's got to be places. Who's going to take her?
Right.
I mean, unless you're independently wealthy and you can just hire everybody to do these things for you.
Right. But
Um,
you'll make a way. I mean, God always makes a way. And
yeah,
there's
exactly.
always a way. And most people, where I was getting at, most people have the fear of not
Mhm.
even taking that step of faith. They want to have everything laid out for them. But no, you were thrown into the deep end of the pool and you didn't know how to swim. And
Yeah,
you're figuring it out. Your daughter, and you got three people up there helping you. All the Trinity. God's speaking to you, you guiding your path, making opportunities, opening doors, and here you are. 7-ish years later, um, and you're kicking ass, and you don't need any names. You're just doing it, and
well,
that's a testament to you and to what you're because like I said, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I knew in my situation, my wife was going to be coming back eventually,
yeah.
and you're in a different ballpark. You're not even in the same game as I'm playing.
And on the kind of, I guess, humorous side, if you look on the bright side of it, you've got a four-sport athlete jock, right? Raising a 6-year-old daughter by himself, doing the laundry, cooking all the food, doing all these things. It is kind of a funny story,
Oh yeah.
absent absent the rough days and the pain, but we've had plenty of good days along the way, you know.
Well, hats off and kudos to you, man. So, this has been fantastic. We're about an hour and a quarter. I know people's attention spans are like super crazy, and I know you got another show to get to. So, as we were, wrap this thing up, bring this plane in
Yeah.
for a landing, what would be your, the theme, the theme we've talked about seems to be, like the name of your show, the fiercely vulnerable, right? Being resilient, challenges, going out and doing stuff that you really don't have all the answers to. So if you were to close out and give people some encouragement, of what you've done, been through, and where you see this thing going, what would be your closing thoughts for us today?
I would say lean into Jesus and God, be strong, be resilient, don't give up, don't ever give up. as Jim Valvano
Yep.
would say. You can do more than you think you're capable of. You just need to challenge yourself and move forward, you know. That would be that would really be it. And do something that it's very rewarding mentally to do something outside of the box you're not sure of. Don't shy away from it and be afraid because speaking from experience, as you said, being thrown into the deep end of the pool. I was forced at that moment to do these things, but if you can consciously go there and do something like that, it's so rewarding. It lifts your mental capacity, and it'll change you as a person. You will see that you are more than who you think you are.
Amen to that. We all are, and that's a fantastic ending statement. So make sure you go and check out Ryan's stuff. His description or all of his links will be in the description. Mainly, it's the 1773tv.com. I'll have his Rumble link on there. This show is on Rumble, and then he's also MAGA underscore punch on X, and he's got a great X stuff. He does great shows, great guests. Fantastic human being. I'm glad to have him on today. So thanks, Ryan, for your time, and keep fighting the good fight, brother.
Thank you, Bruce. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm a fat kid in dodgeball. I'm out.